Hey guys, welcome back to the Thaddeushq Talk Show.
where we talk about things that people don't want to talk about. Roll it! Oh, I was going to come out swinging.
So, today,
Father Josh,
Yes.
what do we have on the agenda?
So, just to set the stage, what do we have at this Christmas time?
Here it comes.
This arch villain, right? We have, King Herod, that pompous, who, let us remember, who's the local king, right? Herod is the local king. And as we all know, Herod decides to try in a desperate ploy.
oh yes,
To
classic.
cling on to his political power. He hears of this rival that's being born, from the Magi, and so he hears about it from them, and so he decides that he's going to cling to his political power by just wiping out any possible rival. Right.
Classic villain
Right.
idea. Yes.
Right.
Kill the person you don't like.
Right, and so just to make sure, we all know it, what Herod decides to do is kill any of the boys like 2 years old and under, right? I think that was the age. Now, one of the interesting facts about Herod was trying to get the people to like him. He was trying to show how like pious and good he was by helping them build the temple. Essentially buy them off, make himself seem like a good person. Then he turns around and does things like this, like, killing all of the young children, right? And so one topic that we wanted to talk about was, let's try to apply that to our own times. When has there ever been a political figure who, in a desperate ploy to hold on to their power, has given the impression of being a good person, member of the people of God, and yet at the same time has the blood of many innocent children on their hands? Obviously, this is a difficult topic for people to talk about. It's a very hot-button topic for people to talk about. What I want to do is explain a little bit more of where the church is coming from. Obviously, President Biden, he's a Catholic, right? He's a Catholic like us. And he's not just a Catholic, but he's someone he's in a very public position, obviously, a huge position of power. He's the president of the United States, the most powerful country in the world. He's the most public figure, the head of that country, in being the president. And he's used his Catholic faith to really bolster his image long before he was president, during many of his political campaigns, including leading up to including in his presidential campaign. And now that he has been president, he likes to draw on his Catholic faith and talk about his Catholic faith, which is part of the reason why, when he holds positions that are so dramatically contrary to that faith, it is a big deal. And so we're going to talk about what the church's mindset is when it finds a person in that position.
Especially with like a high leader, it has a dramatic effect on all the other Catholics and people who don't know their faith as well. And so when you have someone in that big of a political position using this, and then you're seeing what this person stands for, it can have the effect of making these other Catholics who don't know as much about their faith thinking that it's okay. For instance, killing of the innocents.
Right, exactly. So let's get into some of the nitty-gritty details. What we really want to discuss and get into here is that the church actually has precedent for dealing with situations like this. In fact, situations that are at a much, much lower level. And we find the church's mind and what it thinks of these things in
The Code of Canon Law.
Code of Canon Law.
The Code of Canon Law.
So that's what we're going to talk about, to show that it's not just my opinion here or us at Thaddeus that are talking about this, but
The
really
opinion of the Catholic Church.
the Catholic Church, darn it.
Whoa, calm down, Jamal.
So the two main canons, the code says a lot. The code says a lot about a lot of things. And what the Code of Canon Law really is, for those of you who don't know, it's the law of the church. This is different from moral teachings of the church. It's laws that we're governed by, that we're supposed to obey and follow and are supposed to be enforced, okay? Well, anyway, the two canons we want to talk about are canons 915 and canons 916. And what they have to do, it's in the section of the code that talks about receiving the Eucharist. So 915 and 916, they're kind of interrelated. And we'll talk about 916 first. Okay. So Canon 916. What Canon 916 says, I'm going to paraphrase it, but essentially what it's talking about is when each individual Catholic, me or you, if we find ourselves in a position of having committed a grave sin, right? A mortal sin. If we've committed a mortal sin, then we should refrain from receiving Holy Communion. We're all familiar with that, right?
Yeah.
Right. Okay, so it's actually there in canon law. But notice there.
Now, it's not saying refrain from going to Mass, just from receiving. You still have the
Exactly.
obligation of going to Mass if you're in grave
on
sin.
Sunday. Right.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. That's another thing that
Well, I
probably
feel like a
doesn't
lot of
help
people.
this.
Oh no, I feel like that's something that most people don't know. They think, oh, I'm in mortal sin. Okay, I don't go to Mass, and it's like, no, you still have the obligation to go to Mass. It's just you can't receive.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we still going, just because you go to Mass doesn't mean you have to receive communion. In fact, there's certain situations where you shouldn't receive communion, such as if you have eaten before an hour, if you don't have the fast, if you haven't observed the fast, or if you're in a state of mortal sin.
Yep.
But notice there, so with that law, though, the burden, I guess I should say, who that law is directed to is the individual himself. Okay? That law, Canon 916, is not about the priest who's
Distributing.
yeah, who's distributing communion. So what my point is there is the church is not saying there is that if a priest knows someone is in mortal sin, he shouldn't give communion. No, not at all. The person shouldn't present themselves for it. But if a person is presenting themselves for communion, even if a priest knows that they're in mortal sin, he should still give it.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes, because the faithful have the right to the sacrament. Well, also, it's pretty hard to know someone is actually in a state of mortal sin, too.
certainty, 'cause
Yeah,
it's like,
exactly.
well, they could have went to confession before, and you
Right.
don't exactly know.
Right, exactly. Okay, so where does it have to deal with the priest who's actually distributing communion? That's Canon 915.
Okay.
And that's a different canon, okay? And basically, what the church is concerned with here, from a priest's perspective, it's whether scandal is being caused. So what the canon says, what Canon 915 says, is that if a person has been excommunicated or under interdict, so basically they've been like disciplined publicly by the church, you can't receive communion. They shouldn't be given communion. Why? Well, because to do that is basically you flaunting the authority of the church and saying, oh, the Pope excommunicated this person, well, too bad.
You
I'm
don't
giving
care,
him
you're just gonna
communion
give it anyway.
That's
Yeah.
scandalous to the faithful, right? Because it says, oh,
The
well,
authority
maybe-
doesn't matter is pretty much what it's saying.
Right, exactly. So that's scandalous. Well, the second half of the canon, though, says, and others who have obstinately persevered in manifest grave sin should not be admitted to Holy Communion. Okay, let's maybe start from the back and work our way. So grave, we already kind of talked about that.
Yeah.
We know what grave sin is. If it's a mortal sin, if it's a serious sin, if it breaks, the moral law, the Ten Commandments in a serious way. Murder, particularly murder of the innocent, certainly qualifies as a grave sin. Very, very serious. And not just, okay, there's on a certain level, if you're the one actually committing that sin, that's obviously very serious, but cooperating with it, advocating for it, legally allowing, and not just allowing, but pushing for that.
Fighting for that side.
Yeah, exactly. That all qualifies under the seriousness of it. It's like we're talking about the wholesale the business that has boomed over the last 50 years that abortion has been legal in this country.
So it's not just the killing of it, it's also the making money and making into a profit off of the killing.
I mean, it just makes it, it's like how can this get any worse? And then it's like, how much more grave can you possibly get? And one of the reasons why we're hitting this so hard right here is there's a difference. There's a difference between being, a mom who finds herself in a difficult pregnancy, an unplanned pregnancy, okay, and has all of the pressures around her of which obviously someone in our position doesn't know without actually being in it, right? And I'm not saying obviously I have the opinion that abortion is never the answer, but there is a big difference between why some 16-year-old girl might consider that and the
full-blown political leader who's had multiple people telling him this, advocating and pushing
Right.
an entire
And
like
people
political push for something.
Political push, and has gotten many millions of dollars in donations for advocating for this. There is a huge difference between those two. And so when I'm talking about the 16-year-old girl, we would talk about it in a very, very different way. Okay, when talking about the political leader or Planned Parenthood or people who stand to make millions of dollars over this, we're going to talk about that much more harshly. Yes, because it's directed towards that type of person. Okay, so out of those four things, right? Obstinate, persevering, manifest, grave sin. It's grave. We know it's grave. Everyone knows it's grave. From the idea of the church, it is certainly a serious grave sin. Okay, what does the church mean by manifest?
Yeah.
What the church means by manifest is that the sin has to be public, because the idea here is what you're really trying to guard against by not admitting someone to communion. What you're trying to guard against is other people, other Catholics getting the wrong idea. You're trying to guard against the scandal, like we said earlier, right? You're trying to
leading them astray.
Leading them astray, thinking like, oh, well, this must not really actually be that bad. This must,
he's doing all this, but he's still able to receive. It can't be that big of a deal.
Right, exactly. So manifest means it's public. It has to be a public action. If it was a serious sin, but it was private, a serious sin that no one else really knew about, well, the danger there, that person might be putting their own soul in danger, but they're
it's not leading other souls astray.
Right, exactly. So that person, he or she, if you're in a state of grave sin, but it's not manifest, it's not public. Yeah, you still on a personal level, you shouldn't be going to communion, but that's not really on the minister to protect the flock by not admitting you to it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, so it has to be manifest. Grave, manifest. Okay. The other one is persevere. First obstinate and then persevere. We'll talk about obstinate last. But persevere, what does this mean? It means it wasn't a one-time action. Okay? Yes, it's serious. Yes, it's public so people know about it, but it has to be ongoing, because the idea here isn't the church isn't cracking down just on someone who you screwed up, so we're going to hit you over the head with the baseball bat, or something like that, right? No, the idea is to correct the behavior that is ongoing. It is damaging. And what the church really wants is for there to be a conversion and change that behavior.
It's bring the person back into the church.
Exactly. That's the idea. So the person has to have shown that they've persevered in this. They have had multiple chances to change. They have been made aware that this is actually against the church's teaching. They have been made aware on multiple instances that this is something the church really doesn't agree with, and they have to be given the opportunity to change. Now that leads us to the fourth one, obstinate, right? What does
I'm assuming means they are refusing to change?
Exactly. That means not just is it grave and serious, not just is it manifest, is it public, not just has it been ongoing, it's not a one-time action, it's an ongoing thing. It has been brought to their attention. It has been brought to their attention multiple times. It has been brought to their attention by the authorities in the church, like the bishops, like priests, like the Pope, right? It has been brought and publicly stated to them where no reasonable person could say, I was ignorant of this, I didn't know.
There's no chance of them backtracking out
right.
of it.
So when we look at these four different things, obstinate, persevering, manifest, grave sin, we can see the church, all of those things have to be present for that person to not be admitted to Holy Communion. And the reason, again, is to protect against the scandal. Because otherwise, if you take a person like that, who is obstinately persevering in manifest grave sin, what you're essentially saying is, even though we say this is a serious issue, we're not really going to follow through with it.
Not even with something as sacred as the Holy Eucharist.
Exactly. And what message does that send to people?
Well, one, I think it would send that the Eucharist isn't that big of a deal.
Okay. Yeah.
It would send that what they're doing isn't really that bad, and you can pretty much do whatever you want and lead as many people astray as possible. And the church is just not that big of a deal. That's what I feel like.
At least in whatever this particular area.
That's what I feel like it'd be saying.
Yeah. Exactly. So let's apply it. Let's apply it to our political situation, right? And the reason targeting President Biden simply because he is literally the most public person in our country. Okay, so there's other people that this definitely applies to as well. But on this particular issue, the issue of abortion, it is so grave, right? It's definitely grave. Is it manifest public? yeah, like there's literally no
There's
person
a whole, I mean,
who's
that's
more public in our country than the president. His policies, his actions, what he decrees, what he pushes for is totally manifest. It can't be possibly any more manifest than it has been. Has he persevered in it? Yes. Has it been ongoing?
How many years? Yeah, how many years has it been?
However long he's been in politics, it's been a long freaking time, right? like it's a long time. He's obviously had this position, and in fact, if anything, since becoming president, he's become more radical in it. Now, yeah, you can make arguments that, well, that's because the party and the country, his party has shifted more radically that way. Okay, yeah, but he has too as part of it,
and so
yeah, exactly. And then the last one, okay, obstinate. Has he been obstinate in it? No one could make a reasonable argument that the President of the United States does not know that abortion is against Catholic teaching.
There's no way.
No.
There's actually
no, especially
no way.
also because it's publicly been brought to his attention on, television and stuff like that. So the idea, if we apply this canon, and here is kind of one of our main points. If this canon 915, if it does not apply to Joe Biden,
then who does it apply to?
Who on earth could it possibly apply to? Why was it ever written?
What's the point of it?
Is there? Yeah, exactly. If you're looking for someone who obstinately perseveres in manifest grave sin, it's like you can't find someone who has those four items, those four qualifications more strongly because of the position that he's in, because of who he is as such a public figure, right? And to kind of use another example. This isn't a canon that the church just ignores and says, oh, well, it doesn't matter anymore. No, we enforce this canon all the time. Here's an example. Everyone knows the church doesn't give communion to those who are divorced and remarried. Like if someone is divorced and remarried, unless they've gotten an annulment, not to get on that whole topic, which is different from a divorce, but someone who's divorced and remarried, because in the church's view is that person is still married to the first person. So the second one is like that marriage isn't valid. So you're living in a public, because marriage is a public thing. It's something that we do publicly. We literally go to the courthouse. It is a public
grave
thing.
Because since they're not married, it therefore be adultery. Which is
so
grave.
Adultery would be grave. It would be manifest because it's public. It's been persisting, going on for a while. This isn't someone, just having a fall on one weekend and committing adultery or something like that. Like it is a public, ongoing position that the church has consistently taught and said, no, this is against Catholic teaching. You can't be divorced or remarried. So someone a Catholic who would do that, we would consider they're being obstinate. They're being obstinate in that perseverance. They know it's been brought to their attention. So we would say they shouldn't present themselves for Holy Communion, and actually a priest shouldn't give it if it's known in the public, in the public congregation, in the parish. So here's the question, is that if the church, and we're expected to enforce canon 915 when it comes to the divorced and remarried for any, Joe Schmo on the street who no one knows, right? And yet we're going to give a pass on that to the most public person? It's ludicrous.
Yeah, it makes no sense.
It's saying that
it's like on such a mass scale too. It's not just like with the married people, it's them too. Right? No, yeah, and it's affecting people publicly as well. But to the extent that President Biden is affecting people is on such a higher scale than most people ever would. So if you crack down on the two people, why are we backing down and not cracking down on the powerful political person?
It's essentially saying the more power you have, you actually get more of a pass.
Yeah.
Which is the exact opposite of what any of us actually want. Another thing too. A common kind of criticism that people are having is they're saying, some people are saying we shouldn't weaponize the Eucharist, as if to say to deny Joe Biden communion, President Joe Biden communion, would be to weaponize the Eucharist in the culture wars and the political wars, essentially. Imagine this. Imagine there's a father, and he has a daughter. In fact, let's just say it's his only daughter. Let's say and he loves her with all his heart, right? And let's say daughter's growing up and she turns 16 and he's like, you know what? Yeah, you want to start dating? That's great. Bringing guys over, meet the family and stuff. That's great. But I'm gonna tell you this, is that if you bring guys around the house and they don't treat you right, if they disrespect you, they're not really welcome here. Okay? If a guy's going to disrespect my daughter, he's not really welcome in
I feel like
my
every
house.
good father in person should agree with that.
Oh, you'd think so, wouldn't you?
Right. Now imagine this. Imagine that's what happens, right? Daughter's dating, picks a loser. The guy's just a schlep. Treats her bad,
Horrible.
Right. He treats her bad. Tries to show up at the house, like everything's fine. And the dad says, you know what? No. If you treat my daughter like this, you're not welcome here. Now imagine that guy and all of his little friends saying, you know what? You're weaponizing your daughter. You're mad at how I'm acting because you want me to change. You're making a weapon out of your daughter. That's wrong. It'd be nuts. It's the stupidest thing ever, right? It's like, no. It's precisely because the father cares about the daughter that he's enforcing his rule. It's precisely because the church cares about the Eucharist that it should enforce its rule, enforce its law. It's not making a weapon out of the Eucharist at all. It's protecting it against someone who is abusing it. That's what's going on. Part of the problem, I think this was something I wanted to emphasize in this video, that we wanted to emphasize in this video. There's a lot of spilled ink over this topic, a lot of frantic typing going on in social media, a lot of thumb pushing,
There's gonna be some in our comments for sure.
Sure, right. Everyone has an opinion on the topic. But what I think sometimes seems to be getting lost, perhaps, is that the issue at hand isn't what the church teaches with regard to this topic in this situation. The issue isn't, the church, we're not really sure what the church's position is.
No, we know exactly what the church teaches.
It couldn't be any more clear what the church's position throughout its 2,000-year history has been with regard to topics like this. The issue isn't what the church teaches or what the church's law is. The issue is merely whether we're going to live it out. The issue is whether, not what the law is, but whether it's going to be enforced. To give credit to the bishops. To give credit to the bishops and to give credit to Pope Francis. When it comes to publicly stating what the church's teaching is on abortion, many of them have done so. And Pope Francis has actually made some very, very strong statements against abortion as Pope. So on a practical level, what can we do? Pray and talk about it and try to advocate for it and advocate for the unborn. But ultimately, the decision to actually enforce the laws of the church does reside with the church's hierarchy. It does reside with the bishops. So part of this video is an appeal to any bishops who are watching as well, to please enforce the laws, live in action, put into action the laws the church has actually already come up with and stated, because the church has done it for a reason, for the salvation of souls and for the good of the church. And again, that gets to the heart of it. You publicly advocate for this, then no, that line is drawn in the sand. You cannot receive communion because you can't be one body with Jesus while publicly advocating for the slaughter of the innocent. Can't happen.
It doesn't work.
No. Anyway, I think we've talked about the topic.
We did. All right, well, I hope you guys enjoyed the video.
Where we talk about things that people don't want to talk about.
Yes, clearly. So like, share, subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one. See you guys.